Hello. So let's go live. Today, some shocking news, right? Not really surprising, but at least it finally came out, right? That China could take the Mombasa port, right? It was in an agreement like the government signed an agreement with China, right? And the port, the assets at the port they were charged as security to secure loans. So China could take that port because if we won't pay the SGR payments. So anyway, I just wanted to study this thing, and then wanted to analyze in terms of what is the Exim Bank, right? Because people might be wondering what it is, and I have 3 points. One, the modus operandi of China is slow but steady. In our case, our leaders are the ones who have auctioned us, and then nothing is new under the sun. And so these things should not surprise us, because we just need to take heed to warnings. So just to begin, right, I believe that the problem with Africa is Africans, right? We are the ones who are selling ourselves out to other people. We sold ourselves out to the Arabs, to the Europeans, and now to the Chinese. So we can't say that the Arabs are the problem. We can't say that the Chinese were the problem. We can't say that the Europeans were the problem. It's closer to home. And it's time that people said, I will no longer be a problem. I will be a solution, right? And I'll show you how you can do that. So I believe that they have auctioned us again. And so China might take the Port of Mombasa just because they've auctioned us, not because it is absolutely necessary. So let's start with an Exim Bank. An Exim Bank, for those who have done economics or business, it refers to X, that's the export, Im is the import part. So it's an export-import bank. It's basically a bank that facilitates trade, a nation's trade. And I wanted to say what it is by giving an example of the US, right? So many countries have their Exim Bank. I think we also have a loan from India. I think it's this year for agriculture from the Exim Bank of India. So the American bank, this is the one I want to use as an example. This is what it says. The purpose of Exim Bank, that's American, is to aid in financing and to facilitate exports, right? Through a wide variety of loans, guarantees, and insurance programs. So any loan that we get, there's an idea behind it. Because we might see, we've gotten a certain amount of loan from the US, from India, from China, but behind it, what they want to do, the primary purpose of it, is to facilitate exports. And they do that through a variety of loans, right? Like what they say that since its inception, the Exim Bank of the US, it has supported more than 160 billion in US export sales. So us, from our end, will view that the Americans gave us a loan, but Americans, from their view, they will see that they have facilitated exports. And in this case, they say 160 billion worth of US exports since the Exim Bank formed. Let's go to the Exim Bank of China now. So it's the same thing. It's to promote the export of Chinese products and services. That is one of its definitions, right? It's chartered to implement state policies, right, to promote the export of Chinese products and services. It does not say to promote African countries. It says to promote Chinese products and exports. So anytime we are receiving it, we should be aware that we are, helping people, helping the Chinese, making China great again. So anyway, it was established in 1994, 28 years ago. And this is what the Financial Times says, right? The China Exim Bank and the China Development Bank, because there are 3 major banks that do this kind of thing in China, they signed a loan, right? They've signed loans of 110 billion to other developing countries. Between 2009 and 2010, that's just 2009 and 2010, that's 1 year. They've signed 110 billion. And that's worth more than the World Bank did over the same period. These guys are playing at the table more than the World Bank. And we need to know why. Why are they so aggressive, right? That they are even surpassing the World Bank. And not just the World Bank, right? in terms of export, it's export financing, right? Again, I hope you remember, the purpose is to promote their exports. It's not to develop your country, right? Or our country. It's to promote their exports. So these countries compete. Like I said, the US has one, India has one, everybody has one, right? I think even Kenya had one some time back. The Exim Bank of China, it does more of this stuff. It does more of export financing than the G7 countries. The G7 countries are Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom, and of course, the US. They control 58% of the global net worth. But China outdoes them when it comes to export financing. Why does it do that? So that it can help Kenya have an SGR. It can connect Mombasa to Kisumu. No. It does that so that it can help itself, so that it can promote its exports. And it's doing that at a very, very high rate, right? And the US is complaining because one of the reasons why China does it so well is that it's not bound by rules. Like when the US, the G7 countries that I've mentioned, they do it, they have to abide by the Rich Boys Club, the 36 countries Rich Boys Club, the OECD rules. They have to abide by that, right? Like the interest rate, they need to set them, they need to evaluate. I think there was also some they need to evaluate like the environmental impact of what the loans would do. Okay, things of the sort. That's what I think. China does not have to do that. It just goes in and gives as much cash as possible so that it can promote its exports as much as possible, not so that it can help us as much as possible. So at the end of the day, it's self-interest. And China does not publish its interest rates and its fees. It just keeps the world guessing. So you have to go and collect by individual countries. Wait for Kenya to publish, then you go. You wait for Uganda to publish, then you go. And now that's how you have an idea of how much China is lending through its Export-Import Bank and how much it's charging. But it's a matter of secrecy. Why? Because China knows how important it is to force these things on us so that it can promote its own economy, its own exports, right? So anyway, from the Chinese website, they say that it was officially financed by the China Exim Bank, right? And as we've said, the Kenyan government, in its wisdom, they put up the Mombasa Port as part of the security, not protected by sovereign immunity, right? And so when they do that, the Exim Bank has rights because they need their money back. And of course, we've promoted their exports and you're still giving them money back. It's something to think about, right? So anyway, it's the largest infrastructure project in Kenya since independence, the SGR, largest. Actually, that's when I first saw it, I praised it because it's 472 kilometers. Eventually, after it's complete, I think even to Uganda, it will be 2,800 kilometers. It's a really big deal, right? And it makes you wonder, why didn't we do due diligence on this thing so that it can pay itself back instead of having our port as that we could lose our port, having the possibility of losing our port? Why didn't do due diligence on that, right? So anyway, here's what it says on the official website of the Exim Bank of China. The SGR is an international mainline, right? Because it's supposed to connect Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda, right? That adopts Chinese standards, right? Funding, technologies, management, and equipment. So even if you get that, we're adopting Chinese standards, right? Not African standards of doing stuff. Okay, we might say even like the language that we have, when they were launching, I think there's a part of it in Gong. It had Chinese words, right? And then we're adopting the funding. We'll pay back this cash. And if we don't pay back, they'll take back our port. The technologies we're adopting, they're not our own, they're Chinese. Are they teaching us those? If they're teaching us those things, then why do we need Chinese managers over those things? Why do we need Chinese drivers, right? So they've given us their money, we'll give them back their money. They're coming with their technology, but they retain their technology, right? They're coming with the stuff even to manage. So in terms of even management, we're not good to go. They're coming with their equipment. And so we are promoting the guys who are manufacturing those equipment in China. I don't see, Do you see how much this thing is benefiting China? And that was the entire idea. That's the entire idea of an export-import bank. It is not to develop Africa or to develop our economy. So anyway, the modus operandi of China, the Chinese, this is what they do. And I think Africans, we need to learn how other guys operate so that we can react to them in the proper way. Like the Chinese, their approach is slow but steady. They move in slowly and they take over. They don't relax. They don't go back to where they are. They remain where they have come, right? I wanted to give you an example of, like, okay, here's many people who have said this. I'll be talking. There's somebody called Bernard Chan. He's a Hong Kong delegate to the National People's Congress, right? Hong Kong delegate to the National People's Congress. He says that the Chinese system has a tradition of long-term planning and targets. You do it over generations. It's not like Kenya. First, when Moi was there, it was an entire ball game. Okay, when Kenyatta was there, it was ignorance, poverty, and education. When Moi came, fuata nyayo. When Kibaki came, it was Vision 2030. When Uhuru came, it's the Big Four. And it's all just playing around. The Chinese then don't do that. They move long-term planning and targeting, one after the other. And this is what Chan says. It has not always been successful, because there were the 5-year plans under Mao. They were terrible. They failed, right? But the Chinese learned from their experiences, and they adopted and they changed. And that's when China started developing slowly. It entered the World Bank, and then, just slow developments, right? Like forming the Export-Import Bank. Soon after it joined the World Trade Organization, right? So that's another thing. There's a guy, he's Patrick Collar, CEO of a company called Faurecia. It's a French company. The key to success in China is long-term vision and planning. Like our current top, like the politicians in Hong Kong, the European, they all understand that Chinese, they do long-term vision and planning. And so if you want to colonize Africa, if you want to take over Africa, if you want to take the Port of Mombasa, you don't do it, at a go. You do it systematically. Get these guys into debt, and they'll pay you back. Before they pay you back, they have already taken your labor force, they have taken your goods, they have promoted the guys who are back at home. You are building them, and you'll still get back interest from what you gave them. They do long-term planning, right? And that's why the Chinese are focusing on certain areas, ports. They're focusing on police forces. That's why in Zambia you had guys who are complaining that Chinese are trying that the Chinese policemen in Zambia, I think it was Zambia, right? They were really, really complaining. China is targeting certain areas, and it knows why. There was a Kenyan that complained that some Chinese were coming to investigate some crime, and they were in Kenya, and they're asking him questions. And it's not even an international crime, it's a local thing. And a Chinese man is asking him questions. That's a Kenyan who was complaining, right? So I'm hoping that you understand. These guys, they know where to target, and they do it long term. An example, the Chinese discovered silk 5,000 years ago, but they decided to keep it secret. And the emperor, at a time in China, he decreed anybody who takes the silk eggs, like the worms who produce the silk, anybody who takes them out of China, it's a death sentence. You have to keep it within the nation. We have to keep it dominant. So 5,000 years, right, back, they've discovered silk. After some time, an emperor, I'm not sure which time, but I think before the ADs, right, I think a long time before the ADs, perhaps 1,000 or 2,000 years, or perhaps 500 years before the ADs, 500 years BC, right, something of that sort, I'm not sure. He decrees that nobody takes silk out of China, right? If you do it, it's a death sentence. Again, I'm not sure on that date when he made that decree, but what I know is that people only started discovering silk in like in Japan, it was 300 AD. So 5,000 years they've discovered silk in China. They have traded with the Japanese, they have traded with the Europeans for thousands of years, right? but it is only in 300 AD that their neighbors, Japan, they understand and learn the secrets of silk production in 300 AD. And they had to do that in secret because they sent an expedition. They took some girls from China who knew how to do that, and then they brought them back to Japan. And then the Europeans, Justinian, a Byzantine emperor, let's say the Eastern Roman Empire, he sent some monks, and some monks, they hid that silk eggs in their sticks, and they brought it back to Europe in 552 AD, right? So I'm hoping that you guess how the Chinese play. These guys are not a joke. They know what they are doing, and they do it long term, and they do it slowly but steadily. Modus operandi. So anyway, that's a point that I wanted to make. Let me go to my next one. Our leaders have auctioned us. They have sold us to the Chinese. They entered into bad deals knowingly. They sold us hope. And then that is all we have left. All we have left is hope. As the Chinese take over, as the threats of Chinese taking over our ports moves closer to a reality. And so these are the guys we call Judas, the Judas Iscariots. Because it's 30 pieces of silver. They got their kickbacks, they sold our country. Does it sound familiar? When the Arabs came, what did they give us? They gave us cowrie shells and all of those things. When the Europeans, when they came, what did they give us? They gave us guns and positions as they took over Africa. And these guys, they have sold us again. Now to the Chinese. So anyway, I found this thing interesting, like the CS Masharia, and he was saying there was a bit of the Chinese had cut the funding, right? There was, you know, how the Chinese play. If you guys mess up a bit, or if you don't play ball, then they withhold the funding. So the Chinese withheld the funding, and so the Kenyan government says that the Chinese government is asking them to complete a feasibility study on the SGR before they release that funding, and not just from Naivasha to Kisumu, because that's where the funding is will now focus on, but from Mombasa to Kisumu. So I'm thinking the feasibility study was supposed to be done before you even sign the documents for the loan. It was supposed to be done so way back. But here you guys you're saying that you need to complete the feasibility study. Okay, so maybe challenges, you guys met challenges during the way. Couldn't you have predicted those challenges? What are those challenges that were so unpredictable that you could not think of them? Aren't you learned? Isn't that why we employ you? So that was the CS Mashari was saying, and it reminded me of the 48 laws of power, right? Again, when it comes to foreign interactions, it's a game of power, and the Chinese know how to play this game. They play long term. The 48 laws of power, law number 29. You plan all the way to the end. You don't start planning midway. You don't start having surprises midway. It's all the end matters, and that's what it says. The ending is everything. So in this case, the ending was everything. Kisumu was everything. Not even Kisumu, but Rwanda was everything. You need to have studied everything before you started. And why does this fit in the 48 laws of power? It's so that you can account for all possible consequences, all possible obstacles, all twists of fortune. Any twist of fortune, you can account for it. You can budget for it. You can see how you can develop a plan B for it. And more importantly, you plan all the way to the end so that you can know when to stop. Right? So what kind of games are Kenyans playing? Because the Chinese are playing a very, very intense game. It's a very, very intellectual game, and they've played it for thousands of years. Are we ready for that? Anyway, here comes the facts, right? Like, I got this from the Standard. For the SGR to make sense, it has to reach Uganda. Otherwise, the cargo hold won't make sense from Nairobi to Naivasha, according to the Standard, right? And then it not only has to do that, but it has to do that ahead of the Tanzanian Rwandan SGR line. So it has two tasks. One, it has to reach Kisumu. Two, it has to do it before the Tanzanian and Rwandan SGR line become a reality. Didn't this guy's plan before this? Is it a surprise that Tanzania and Uganda could have built, Tanzania and Rwanda could have built an SGR line, and that Uganda could have gone in that direction? Is it something surprising to us? Why do you have to do another feasibility study to show that Mombasa to Kisumu is viable? And we are this late in the game. We have already built until Kisumu. Anyway, just to continue, Uganda, it dropped from being Kenya's largest trading partners, right? And this one I got from the Standard, on account of difficulties experienced by Ugandan businesses moving goods through Kenya. So they say it's difficult to move through goods through Kenya. And they say that there is ease now offered by Tanzania in the movement of these goods. So Tanzania is improving. And remember, we need to get ahead of Tanzania according to the Standard, right? And even if we get ahead of Tanzania and they are more efficient than us, then Uganda will go to Tanzania. And so we'll have what we call a white elephant, a useless project. If it has to reach Uganda to make business sense, and if Uganda now turns to the Tanzanian way, then we'll have a white elephant, something that we've spent so much on that is now useless to us, right? And here's another surprise. In June 9th, 2018, the Tanzania Railways Corporation launched a cargo service to Uganda through the Lake Victoria ports of Mwanza and Port Bell. So Tanzania is already moving ahead. Not sure if it's an SGR line, but it's something. And it could be more efficient than ours. So we might have a useless project on our hands. And then we might also have the port in Mombasa in the hands of foreigners, still having bought their goods, still having taken their labor force, and still paying guys in China who are still there. So we are really, really helping China. There's a question that Shaka Zulu, I don't know if you watched the movie, but I found it interesting. There was a part where Shaka Zulu said, what happens when you guys, the Europeans, love our land and do not want to leave it? That this land becomes your home. What happens then? When my children grow and they need more land, and your children grow and they love this land and they don't want to go away. We need to play long term. Eventually, the Chinese will stay. And it will be a new era. That's what I'm saying. So I want you guys to heed the warning. Heed the warning. So many have said it. It's not just me. So many people have said it, right? Confucius, a Chinese. His name was Confuzi. Missionaries, Jesuit missionaries gave him the name Confucius. That's the Latinized name, Confucius. Again, it shows you how the missionaries have played a part in world history. He said, people learn through three ways. I think I've said it before. By reflection, you evaluate something. By imitation, you imitate somebody, you know. And by experience. We need to learn by reflection, because it seems that the SGR guys didn't learn by reflection, because it was easy to see. Uganda could have moved this way, right, the Tanzanian way. The SGR could, if they did that, then what happens to the SGR? Let's plan till the end. Let's account for all of these things, right? But they didn't, so they now need to do it again by experience, not by reflection. They should have done it by reflection. By imitation, like people have resisted. I think there are countries in Europe, in Eastern Europe, that have resisted the Chinese, and they have said they don't need it. I don't know if it's Malaysia, Bangladesh, I don't know, but there's a country that has said that they don't need the Chinese within their borders, right? They don't need the Chinese loans, and we can move in that direction. We can imitate them, right? So, but we don't learn. And when you don't learn, what happens? We have a universal healthcare program, which by my evaluation, it's likely to fail. And that's 3.2 billion from the Japanese. So we'll have a failed program and we'll have 3.2 billion to pay back. We have the housing program, right? And that will collect 48 billion from us annually. And then there's a fraud of 2.4 billion that the EACC is investigating when it came to the allocation of houses for senior government officials. So we could have used this cash to pay back the Chinese, but we won't use it. We will use it on elephant projects that will wash away, and then we'll still have to pay the Chinese. We'll have free primary education, where we had errors, 7 billion textbooks, 7 billion worth of textbooks, they had errors in them. There's an Auditor General report that had 16 billion meant for free laptops went missing. EACC right now is investigating a 10 billion procurement scandal of textbooks. These are billions, and the China is still coming for our port. Couldn't we have used this cash for that, so that we get rid of them and we start building ourselves? Is it that hard to plan? Is it that hard to reflect? Must we learn by experience? We must not. We should heed the warning. There is a British, the Americans, there's somebody called Paul Rivera, and he was just a simple guy in America. And at one time, the British were coming. So there's a civil war between America and the US, and he rode from midnight, right, to warn the Americans that the British are coming. And that's when you hear things like, the British are coming, the British are coming. I don't know if you remember. And that was in April 1772. And when he rode, there were 3 riders, right? And what they did was they rang bells, they sent messages, they banged on drums, they sent out alarm guns, they lit bonfires, they did everything to warn the Americans that the British are coming. And what did the Americans do? They prepared for the British. And that's how they won the Battle of Concord. And they pushed the British back to all the way to was it Boston, right? And it was just militia. They just organized. The British were at that time, the British were the best. The Americans, they had to organize themselves, but they did it. They were militia. The British were an army. But only heeding a warning helped them to push back the British. We can push back the Chinese if we heed the warning that these guys play long term and they're coming and they might stay. Again, the problem with Africa is Africans. We are selling ourselves out. We sold ourselves out to the Arabs. We sold ourselves out to the Europeans. We are selling ourselves out to the Chinese. The Chinese operate in a slow but steady manner over generations, and they know what they're doing. Our Kenyan leaders, they continue auctioning us. We must heed the warning. We must say that I am no longer a problem. I will no longer be a problem. I will be a solution. And you must fight these white elephants wherever you see them. No matter how good they look, you must fight them, because they will become useless and they will give the others an excuse to come for us. So that's what I had today. I don't have the silk. I'm not sure when the emperor said that, but he said that I think hundreds of years before the Japanese got it and hundreds of years before the Europeans got it. So that's what I had for today. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much, especially those guys who are subscribing on YouTube. Please continue subscribing, and yeah, see you tomorrow. Bye bye.